Hey, Todd.
Hello, Ryan.
It's not a normal episode.
DJ RR.
You got some go live hype.
Yes, sir.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to give some viewers a chance to get in here. I see the numbers shooting up. While people are joining us for this live Q&A, it's the Wednesday Go Live. Be sure to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on LinkedIn. Check us out on the Facebook page, wherever you're watching from. We hope you join in and get a lot out of this. We're going to take your questions for an hour. All right, so you got an hour with Todd and I. We're going to do our best to take your questions. Be sure to leave your comments on the videos and on the show. Yeah, definitely hit that like, though. That helps us in the algorithm. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Todd, it's been an interesting week. We got some new content on the site. Before we get into the questions, we just launched Breaking the Safe. So Yuval Yurt and I are going to look at the SAFe framework. So scaled Agile and see.
Stoked to see some of that.
Yeah, so
we're going to see what you and Yuval get into.
We're going to see what's good, what's bad, and what's ugly in it. And Yuval's a SAFe fellow, so he's got some inside info, and we're going to share a lot of that too. I know you and Will are continuing the time to market, the T to M.
Yeah, we're really going deep in there, which is cool.
And we have our membership area, of course. If you join as a member, costs a little bit of money, but we got deeper into Scrum going. Great prep for PSM 3, becoming a trainer. Really good, deep information, helping you become a better practitioner. So I guess that's all the marketing stuff we need to do.
Our Southwest thing that we did yesterday.
Yeah, there's a new video.
That was super fun.
What happened at Southwest? So Todd and I went down the Southwest rabbit hole, did a ton of reading, and then mapped out using EBM what could be some factors in the meltdown at Southwest. So we hope you check that out too.
Yeah, sorry I had to plug us with that, Ryan. That was really fun to dig into. You and I spent an entire several hours digging into that.
Yeah, we definitely went deep. See a lot of friends of the show. Marco, hey. Juan Carlos, thanks for joining us in the first Q&A. Michaela, welcome. Happy Wednesday indeed. Let's see here. Tomas, hello, good friend. Can't wait to see how you interpret all of these questions alongside us. And Sprinkler, what is up? All right. We need some questions. So hopefully some questions pop in. In the meantime, we did get a right sizing question. Todd, should we take a look at this?
Yeah, let's take a look at it.
All right. How do we right size an item if we don't know our cycle time? We don't have any historical data. How to get started would be great if you could also talk how that would work within sprints in Scrum. Now there's some assumptions here. I'd assume with 2-week sprint, I'd be looking at items taking 10 days or less. It's probably a good place to start.
Yeah. So if we're going to talk within the bounds of Scrum here. So, my rule of thumb was always, can this PBI get done in half the sprint or less? That was a Toddism. That was my rule of thumb. And so if you look at that from that perspective, I wouldn't even go 10 days there, right? 10 days is a massive amount of time spent on a single product backlog item. Like, let's have an opportunity to split it. How can we get it? Is there a corner of it we can get done and deliver some value with it? So I think that I'd be inclined, before you have historical data and you can look at things like a SLE, can we get this done within the bounds of an SLE, something like that? You're never going to have the perfect answer. But I think right sizing and saying, can this thing get done in half the sprint or less would be a good question to start. That's just some guidelines before you really have data. You'll get data fairly quickly, right? So and data is only going to be able for you to ask smarter questions. You're going to be wrong. So I think probably saying 10 days or less is far too much if you're talking about the bounds of 2-week sprint. I'd probably half that. But then again, honestly, this is just like a consulting off the top of my head, like based off of my experiences advice. This isn't necessarily the end all be all. This is what you should do. I want to make sure I'm very clear about that.
Yeah. So my answer is super similar to Todd's. With no historical data, you're basically trying to do your best effort to put work into a sprint that meets a sprint goal. right? And so I think having a good sprint goal, some good product backlog refinement is going to help you in the absence of data. So if the work is as small as possible, if the goal is well understood, you just start asking, all right, we know that this is the most important thing to go into our sprint that meets our goal. Can we accomplish this within the sprint? Yes or no? And if the team agrees, yes, we think we can, move to the next item that helps us achieve our goal. Can this fit along with this other piece? Yes or no? And you start working through, I think you start working through the sprint backlog discussion that way. But also it's back to that ruthlessness that we've been talking about lately. We need stories as small as responsibly possible. We need our product backlog items to be tight, right? We need and which means good product backlog refinement. I think it's just, look, it's not required in Scrum. It's not an official event, but it is the next closest thing to that, right? I think it's just so essential in today's world that we have really well refined and understood stories or product backlog items, and that we're able to go into sprint planning confident that this is the minimal but sufficient to meet a need. And if that's the case, then I think some of the techniques that Todd and I talked about become much simpler to implement in the absence of data.
Yeah. No
Good?
perfect answer, just good enough, right? Good enough to get started.
Right. And so since you cannot plan complexity perfectly, sometimes you're going to hit on this, sometimes you're going to miss, but over time, the data will build up and then we can become more predictable as we learn more about the way we work. And then keep in mind, having a cycle time or actually, what I think I would actually look at throughput, maybe even a little bit more here in sprint planning. If your team is continually changing in composition, if people are coming in and out of the team, if the product backlog is unstable, if you're assigned to multiple products or projects, if the team isn't focusing in one area, all of this data is not going to help you become consistent, right? So there's a lot of caveats here too that makes your data reliable. And so I think there's organizational impediments to work on, there's team dynamics to work on, and it may not actually be your cycle time or throughput that are actually the blocker to understanding how much work to put in a sprint. Does that sound right, Todd?
Yeah.
Cool. Great question. Thanks for kicking us off. We definitely needed that. Keep the questions coming, everybody. And let's jump to the next one. So, Tomas, how to deal with the culture of being busy when there is no time to stop and reflect and people do not want to experiment? This sounds pretty tricky, Todd.
Yeah. The culture of busy. So in evidence-based management, under ability to innovate, there's something that you can look at that has to deal with context switching, right? And we talk about this quite a bit. Brian, I think we did a video on context switching and the cost of just being busy. So here's what we often find is that people are assigned to multiple things just to keep everybody busy, and therefore they can't really do any of those well. So I think when there's no time to stop and reflect, you have to make the time. And if it is a culture of busy and you don't have the let's say the opportunity in that space given to you, you have to make it to prove the point that you need it, right? You can't just go up and say it seems like all we're doing is being busy all the time, right? I don't think that anybody's going to find that a good answer. But if you go back and you say, like, maybe you get access to the system that shows where people were spread out, because you got to, like, in most organizations, you've got to identify where you're working and why you're working and where you're working. And I think that really helps helps you paint a case to show how many people are working on how many different things. The proof is in the data if you can get it. And then furthermore, taking that and showing some of the studies, like Ryan, you oftentimes do a thing about Jerry, or not Jerry, who was that?
Jerry Weinberg.
Jerry Weinberg, yeah, I was right. And where he came up with some of the studies about context switching. I think it's having a conversation about it and doing a little bit of due diligence to prove it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the culture of busyness, to Todd's point, I think we make the busyness transparent. I think we start measuring the impacts of that busyness. You know, like Todd said, we talk about context switching quite a bit, and we try to monetize that. We try to show that not only is it just disruptive to people, but it's costly. And something that we do in our product owner and Scrum Master courses is we actually walk through monetizing these EBM metrics and showing that as a Scrum Master, we can demonstrate that, yeah, maybe it's for a team of 10, maybe it's $1 million cost to not let a team focus. And we dive into that discussion and we start getting the attention of people. So, Tomaz, I think the big idea here is that we really want to talk in terms of things that are important to the people who are seemingly uninterested in this problem, and show them that they get a true benefit by addressing the busyness. I also think there was a chart that popped up, and I saw it come through on social media yesterday, and I wish I would have saved it. But there's actually at the 60 or 70% utilized point is the greatest economic return on a team. And there was some new data, some new information, but 100% utilization in a culture of busyness is actually a loss, typically in productivity and revenue. And so I think digging up those studies and starting to socialize those ideas could be really valuable as well.
Yeah.
Great question. Thanks for being here.
Cultures of being busy.
Culture. Too bad it's so prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Juan Manuel, the dynamic duo. We appreciate that. That is it's very nice to see you here. Welcome.
Yeah, good seeing you again, Juan.
We have a LinkedIn user asking, is it an option to kick off with shorter sprints in order to learn faster? Of course. Sprint length is just a planning horizon. You can decide to start your Scrum initiatives with 1 day, 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 4 week sprints. You got to keep it under a month, right? So that is the guidance from the Scrum guidance. We keep it under a month, but the sprint length is your planning horizon. There's no right or wrong sprint length. There's no standard, right? Everyone says, or we run into this quite a bit. Well, 2 weeks is the right sprint length. Well, says who, right? It's totally up to the team and the organization to decide how long can we go without feedback? How long is it safe to go without feedback from a customer? How long can our product owner or developers focus, right? How stable is our product backlog? You know, all of these considerations come into play as we're picking a sprint length. And so can you start shorter? Absolutely. Todd often will start teams with a shorter rather than longer sprint length just to make some of the pain points of their process be really felt so that we can get to the root of what's holding us back.
Yeah, I've really arrived in starting with 1 week sprints right out of the gate, right? Really small planning horizon, really small sprint goal, hopefully achievable. Hopefully we can deliver something of value and we can learn, and then we can rinse and we can repeat. And then we can have the conversation in a few sprints, whether the sprint length is suitable or not. So I've really arrived on really liking that. But there's going to be context where that doesn't work, right? So that's where my head has been at, is so long as an increment can be done at the end of 1 week, because that's something that we want to get into a habit of.
Cool. Thanks for that question, LinkedIn user. We certainly appreciate it. So Elsevier, I'm going to interpret this question. So first of all, thank you for streaming. You're welcome. We're going to be here. We're going to try to do every Wednesday at noon Eastern. So mark it in your calendars. We'll send out some reminders, and this is how you get your questions asked and answered directly from Todd and I. Is it, I'm going to say, acceptable to work overtime to achieve a sprint goal if we made a mistake while in refinement or in sprint planning? So Todd, that's how I'm going to interpret what this question is asking. If I've missed the mark, feel free to leave a follow-up comment. But is overtime okay if we realize we made a mistake and we have to work a little bit over to hit our sprint goal? What do you think on that, Todd? I don't know if we've had this. If that's the question, great question. I don't think we've actually talked about this in great depth.
Yeah, it's interesting. So long as it doesn't become a frequent thing. So when the times where I've been a product owner, some of my opening conversations with teams are, listen, I'm super passionate about what we're doing here. And there's going to be times where we need to push, right? I can't be the one to force you to push. I'm just going to say, when I say I really need you on this one, I really need you on it as much as you can help me, just because of what I'm seeing in the market. That is the exception, not the rule. And so if I'm asking for everybody to kind of hop on board, now we don't reduce any kind of quality because of that. But there are studies that show the impact of overtime on quality and morale. And so I think that so long as it isn't something that becomes a really regular thing, so long as it's something that is the exception, not the rule, I absolutely think that it's okay. Now, if it becomes a exorbitant amount, like a 90-hour work week, maybe it's worthy of having a conversation as a Scrum team as to whether you should cancel and or rethink the scope of the goal.
I like it. Great question. Thanks for being here. We hope we got it right. So Shivam, how to create a good sprint goal without ands and ors and commas and buts. So Todd and I have a rule. We don't put the word and, we don't put the word or, no commas, no ticket numbers in our sprint goals. But the question here is, how do we avoid that when we're doing 3-week sprints and the sprint backlog is not small? So that's the first part. The second part of the question is it fine to have PBIs that are not linked to the sprint goal directly? Todd, I'm going to jump ahead to the second part.
Do it.
Yes, it is. It is awesome it's perfectly fine. You can have a sprint backlog that has product backlog items that are not directly related to the sprint goal. Someone out there might be going, wait a minute, how could that be possible? Well, what if you have a defect or a bug that you need to take care of, right? We have a production issue that's going to make it into the next sprint. Well, that's likely not tied directly to your sprint goal, but it's work we still have to do, right? And so the way that we treat this is the work tied to the sprint goal is most important. We preserve that work. We protect that work. We check the item age of that work. We make sure that things are going in a great direction with that work. And we would be willing to drop this outside work if we had to in order to make our sprint goal. But not everything has to be tied to the sprint goal. For the first part, Todd, what do you think about, using our rules about sprint goals for a 3-week sprint when the backlog isn't small?
Maybe I'm just jaded, but even 3 weeks seems like such a long time to me these days. I really do. So I may walk into a retrospective questioning our sprint length, because if you just have so much, it seems like there's so much stuff. Maybe your planning horizon is long. Now, that being said, Ryan, you named all the reasons why we arrive at a sprint length. Really, it's truly how long a product owner wants to go away from the stakeholders without getting feedback. In most of the instances here, though, I see that we're just trying to jam as much stuff in and complete it across the 3 weeks, right?
Yep.
Sorry if you can hear that squeaking. That is Ray, who has a new squeaker toy. Ray being my 1-year-old golden retriever puppy. So I just see a sprint goal. We can't come up with a sprint goal. We have so much stuff in our sprint backlog for 3 weeks. Maybe it's time to evaluate your iteration length. Could be. That's just one idea.
I like it. Very good. Elia, hey, UK in here. And
hey.
We have a question. How do I coach a new product owner who has no knowledge of Scrum? I'm a Scrum master, and some Great Britain and UK love sent in the question. So thank you. We appreciate that. We love the good vibes coming over the pond. To this question. So Todd, this is kind of a self-serving answer, right? I would send your product owners straight over to our free Scrum Framework 101 course here on the YouTube channel, right? So if you want them to get a good grounding in Scrum, I think it's a couple hours of videos at the most. It's not a huge investment. They could be done in half a day with a couple reads of the Scrum Guide. I think that is a great way to get the product owner engaged in what we're trying to do with the framework. And then I think from that point, that tees up a great opportunity for you to sit down with that product owner and say, look, now you know the mechanics, you know the nuts and bolts. Let's talk about how every aspect of Scrum helps you develop and create and release and turn a profit on a product, and really relate every aspect of Scrum back to what the product owner needs in order to get a product out into the world. And I think that kicks off a great conversation. It makes it about the product owner, not about Scrum. And I think that helps you kind of build that relationship of serving and coaching that product owner. What do you think, Todd?
Yeah. I mean, assuming that you have and you're underway, right? I think the 3 V's of product ownership: vision, value, validation. Make sure that there's very clear vision for what you're trying to accomplish. Make sure that the product owner is thinking of value all the time. And so vision, maybe tactically how to create a vision, what a vision means, the idea behind a vision, making a vision transparent. Value, understanding and interpreting what you think are valuable value propositions. And that means stakeholder management. That means having those conversations in your thoughts, being in the product backlog in a very clear manner that the team can take and refine with you. And then validation. Part of a validation is a sprint review. Although that's not true validation. What we really want to validate is stuff in production that customers are using. So I think vision, value, and validation, and just kind of build out each area from there. Like, is our vision clear? Is it transparent? Do people understand it? Is it right? Value, all the things I was mentioning about with value. Are we validating? And then scientific method, right? Rinse, repeat over and over again as they kind of get to it. So Ryan, as you said, basic fundamentals of Scrum. Tactically, though, make sure they know that to own and operate that sprint review, and then work towards them for product backlog management, and then even furthermore validating what's happening in production. So a lot of stuff. You're busy.
Yeah,
you're busy,
and it never ends, right?
Yeah.
The understanding and the ideas and the implementations are always changing. So build that relationship early, be a great partner, and then do exactly what Todd just said.
All the things. By the end of today.
Hey, it's midday. You should be all right.
Just kidding.
Sprinkler says Weinberg's Secrets of Consulting is excellent. I concur, my good sir. Let's see. Here's a good one. Alan, how do you know how efficient Scrum is in ICT companies? So telecommunication tech. There are definitely case studies on the scrum.org website that involve telecom, right? And I love this question. I brought it up for us to look at real quick because, look, telecom, medical device, hospitals, police forces, HR departments, financial organizations. Todd, we've worked in retail. We've worked in weapons development. All sorts of different problems. When there's complexity, Scrum can be of value. Now, is it going to look the same in every organization? No. Telecommunications and finance and other types of companies are regulated. So there are things that need to happen in a definition of done, for example, or some processes that need to be rethought. But the idea is the same, I think, across companies working in complex domains and doing complex product development. Scrum can help you uncover better ways of doing that. And so as a framework, there's a lot of room for your industry specific things and needs. But if it's a complex problem, for our money, Todd and I are always going to invest in a process that brings empirical process control to the forefront. Mm-hmm. And right now, Scrum is the best method to do that.
Yeah, from both a product and a process perspective, right? And I think Ryan, you always center me around highly regulated environments where shipping isn't always like the easiest, right? So I know you have a lot of experience in that realm. That doesn't necessarily mean that we can't bring transparency to what we're building and leverage sprint reviews and then improve our process by leveraging retrospectives. So although we can't validate as frequently as we would like, we can leverage Scrum for all those things so that we can do the best we can to build the right thing, right?
Yeah. Let me give an example of that. So regulated environments, especially, like I distinctly remember a meeting I was in, and I'm a Scrum Master trying to help a team get a little wiggle room on being able to ship without so many heavy regulations on it. Now, first and foremost, I'm a rule follower, right? So I'm never the person saying skip the step or work around the process. I'm a rule follower. But sitting in a meeting, I had looked at a certain practice we were doing to validate work, and it was very labor intensive. It took a long time to do. And I couldn't find the rule or regulation that the work was tied to. Right. And so sitting in a meeting with legal, compliance, HR was in there for other reasons. And the leadership team, I said, look, this process costs this much money. It's taking this much time. It delays delivery to a customer by this much. And by the way, I can't find the regulations it's tied to. And so can someone help me actually understand why we're doing this? And as it turns out, we were doing it because that's the way it was always done. Legal and compliance could not actually justify the validation type of work we were doing in this one instance, and we dropped it. Were people a little mad at me for pointing out the fact that we were being required to do something that was unnecessary? Yes. And as a Scrum Master, I'm allowed to take flesh wounds, just not, kill shots, right? You want to keep your job, but you also want to push boundaries. As Ken Schwaber would always say, a dead Scrum Master is a useless Scrum Master. I agree with that. But in this case, we pushed a little bit and we got some breathing room for the team. We had a very big burden lifted. And the only thing I did there was bring visibility to it. We're doing this. There's a cost to it. It delays other work, and we can't tie it to a rule. And if they can find the rule, great. And then we try to shorten that process. But I think there's a lot of things in these organizations that we're doing because that's what we've always done. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for a Scrum Master to be a great partner in looking at shedding some light on what we're actually doing. Cool. All right. Great question, Alan. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it. LG, how do I tackle a team with a we finish when we finish mentality? Due to this, items and sprints always get carried over. Kudos from Dallas. Hey, welcome from Dallas. We appreciate it. Todd, what do you think here?
I think that Will and I are about to drop a video about aging that your team should watch. If you're carrying over work, so work item age, from the time you start something until current time, how many days have we been working on something? If you carry it over into the next sprint, it's still aging. And so if we started something in sprint 1 and it's sprint 3 and we're still working on that thing, we've carried it over, the ticker's still going. And so we should be looking at that. If we've been working on something for 38 days, there's a whole bunch of problems that come with that. The risk that we're doing the wrong thing, right? The validation of it being done, which is what Scrum is all about. So I would really, this is where I would zero in and say, I think that maybe go away from the 3 questions in the daily Scrum and start talking about how your PBIs are aging. And we've put a bunch of videos out there about aging, right? Aging doesn't necessarily mean we planned it and put it into a sprint. But if this is a problem and you're just not starting it, you're just carrying things in, I might look at it that way. But this sounds like stuff that we started and we just continue to carry over and never finish. So I would look at work item age 100%. And that will be very illuminating to you and your team, I think.
Yeah, Todd, let me tag that just a little bit. I wholeheartedly agree. There was a question in the comment section on our YouTube channel that was similar to this. What's a great metric to use in a daily Scrum, right? So this person they want to dump the 3 questions and they wanted a metric item aging, to Todd's point. So my question would be to LG as well. First of all, thanks for sharing the question. It's not always easy to point out things that aren't going well. So we appreciate that courage. Maybe jump into a daily Scrum and see what they're doing. Because if we have work constantly carrying over, are we really checking in on our progress towards the sprint goal, our progress on the work? Are we adapting our sprint backlog based off of what we're learning? And if not, why not? And I think to Todd's point, item age is a great indicator that something's either going great or something's off, or maybe we need to keep an eye on something. So I would really diagnose the daily Scrum, and maybe they've stopped having it, or maybe it's turned into a status report. But that event is designed to help us avoid the very situation that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. It's also, I don't want to get too stuck on this one, but I think there's a professionalism aspect that we could kind of pull up on here too, Todd. When I go into a sprint review and I've got stakeholders asking, what did we do and how are things going? And we're continually carrying over things. And how respectful is that to the stakeholder? Right. If we're not hitting our sprint goals, if we're not worried about getting to done by the end of the sprint, there's a professionalism thing there that I might tug on as well. I would do it gently. I wouldn't just step up and say, you all are amateurs and toss a table over. I think that's not going to be a good approach, but there's some kind of thread there that I would start pulling on about professionalism, respect for the stakeholder, and really trying to make sure expectations are aligned. If we're committing to this sprint goal, we need to make sure that the subsequent work is getting to a done state so that we're releasable. Anything there, Todd?
Nope.
All right. Daniel Lee, welcome back. So my team typically draws in PBIs into the sprint and we work towards completing them. However, we don't define a clear sprint goal. Is it common for teams not to have a sprint goal? Yes, it is a widely abused and used anti-pattern.
Yeah, 100%. And what I would do here is I would immediately say I'm going to take it a step above this, right? What's your product goal? Do you have a product goal? And if you don't have a product goal, that's where I would start. And even further above that, a little EBM and right, a strategic goal. So there is no such thing as a strategic goal in Scrum. We talk a lot about product owners and having to have a vision. But I'd start to look at goal structure, because if you can't find what a sprint goal is, it tells me that there's probably a lack of alignment on something higher than that. And a sprint goal should be a step towards achieving that product goal. And there should be a very clear, concise, concrete step that we're trying to achieve in this sprint. And yes, there's some product backlog items that are unrelated potentially, but I would, that's where my mind today would start. One of the biggest things that drives behaviors in an office environment is goals, right? Goals and what we measure. So I would maybe look there and say, we can't have a good sprint goal because we don't know what our product goal is, right? A longer term goal for the Scrum team. That's what I'm thinking today.
Yeah. So definitely common, but to Todd's point, let's fix it. Right. Thank you for the question. It's a good one. Elias come back with a quick follow-up. The team that they're working with, it's a day. Oh, Todd, it's a data team. So they don't always have something tangible or usable by the end of a sprint. Lots of back-end work that's not usable. Is this okay in Scrum? First and foremost, you don't need our permission to do something, right? So when we say okay or not, I think we're going to shift it to what could we try to do in this situation? Look, Todd and I have both worked with data teams. Let's face it, Todd, you're a data nerd. So, and I love it because he's always got these great insights about our business, about our students. But even when he's building the infrastructure for this reporting stuff that he does, which is, it's extensive, it's awesome. He's got EBM running in the background for our company. So evidence-based management is something we leverage. But even when he's building out the architecture for this and the models, he's always got at least one piece of data that pops up, right? He's always got something. Hey, Ryan, check out this new report. It's not, some of the back end stuff is missing, but this is what it's going to be. And I get all excited and I start like, yeah. And he goes off and continues. And, but there's always something, and I think it comes back to components and features. If you have a data science team that's just building the data model and that's what we're delivering, then that's hard to see in a sprint review. But if you have a team who's like, all right, we know this data model is coming and we know that this is what the report's going to look like. And we're going to maybe kind of fake a few pieces here, but we're going to use the model there. And we're going to start. I think that's when we get out of this mode of, well, we can't do Scrum because we're all back. No. There's something that's important to a user. And when we start looking for those slices of things that are important, I think better outcomes can happen. What do you think, Todd?
Oh, let me give an example of a data team. So that I was working with a company that had seven different inventory databases. And the idea, and they had no holistic view of anything on the bottom of it. And so the idea was to create a data repository that they could search and you could find common things and understand how to manage inventory better across the company. And I really pressed upon the team that in the first sprint, they need to deliver something done. And they might have built the ugliest web page I've ever seen, right? But it showed data on it coming from 2 different databases. And during the sprint review, one of the stakeholders that was connected remotely said, how in the world did you get that data all on the same? It takes me days, if not weeks, to get that in the same spreadsheet and compare it. And you got that, like you clicked a button and it's there. And then, by the way, I just updated something here and you clicked refresh and it's there. How do I get that? And the next sprint became about finding a way to easily get that to that stakeholder because of how much it improved their ability to look across those 2 databases, right? And so to your point, Ryan, sometimes these visual components for us to be able to interpolate and understand what's happening with that data allows our stakeholders, when they come into a sprint review, to ask questions. And maybe it's about the validity of something. Maybe it's just a quick study that we're doing, but some kind of conversation enabler with stakeholders. And that was really a powerful moment to me, and especially because it was like the first sprint, and they had never worked in any of the tooling, and they had never used Scrum before. So it was like we delivered an increment in the very first sprint with all these things going against us. And by the way, it was something usable to a stakeholder that in the next sprint we delivered. So it's pretty awesome.
Nice. Great question, Todd. Thanks for that story. I think that's really helpful. Samuel, what are the components of year-end metrics or reports? Is this an accountability of a Scrum Master? I was actually thinking about this over the holiday break, Todd. So it's Christmas. I'm sitting around at post gift wrap or gift opening. My kids have destroyed our living room, and I'm picking up trash, and I sit down and think about I started just thinking about reflecting on the year, right? And what I came back to was the way that I would think about our year would be in the context of the EBM framework, right? I would think about, our time to market, our ability to innovate, which for us is really calendar days, right? I think that's a big metric that's an insight you had earlier this year, that calendar is really vital to our ability to innovate and do new things, our current value, our unrealized value. And so if I'm thinking about year-end metrics or reports from the context of a portfolio or a Scrum team, or even some larger initiative, my mind immediately goes to those 4 KVAs, the 4 key value areas in evidence-based management. Todd, I'm sure you got a different take on this. As far as the accountability of a Scrum Master, I think this is a team. This is a leadership group. This is going to be a shared responsibility. A Scrum Master is not a report gatherer. I don't think the Scrum Master is solely accountable, especially for current value and unrealized value. Those sound like product owner ideas to me. And so even I think developers have an obligation to start helping with time to market type metrics, making sure that those are understood and delivered. And I think even leadership has some accountability and ability to innovate. Every impediment at an organizational level that slows a team down is going to hurt our ability to innovate. So maybe it's more of a holistic gathering of information that builds out our dashboards. But for me, it's EBM. What do you think, Todd?
I think so. I think so too. I don't think I really have too much more to add about EBM. One thing I think might be interesting though is to take a step back at the end of the year, and sometimes I wonder if we our retrospectives are a little bit short-sighted. We're only doing on a per sprint basis. Maybe we need to start finding a way to make it look a little bit more holistic, but maybe it's a time to reflect with the whole team on how the previous year went, celebrate some successes, understand what we might do better and different into the next year. I think that it's fair to say that product owner and developers have different viewpoints here. A2I and time to market to me are mostly developers, and UV and CV are mostly product owner, but the Scrum Master, I think, guides but stays out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Samuel. Thank you very much. All right, we have a friend from Greensboro, North Carolina. Todd, I'm actually going to be flying into Greensboro here in March for a quick trip with my boys. They're football players, and Greensboro has some really great opportunities out there. But anyways, that's not what we're talking about. What is our point of view about the new tools in the market, which might have the potential to rule out a Scrum Master role like Chat GPT, apps to do retro, daily Scrum, etc.? All right. So I have been doing a lot of work with Chat GPT. Todd, I've been bombing our Slack. I've been in Todd's DMs with output from Chat GPT. The future is now, but the future's not scary, is my take on Chat GPT. I think it is a glorified search engine. It comes up with some really interesting things, but it's only as good as the data inside of it, right? So I don't feel like it's doing anything outside of intelligently ordering information on the internet or information it's been fed. And so I don't believe Chat GPT is anywhere close to overtaking the role of a Scrum Master. In fact, some people on LinkedIn have been doing some tests on whether or not ChatGPT could pass the PSM1 or the PSM2 or some of the Scrum.org assessments, and the answer is no. It cannot actually do that, and so that was kind of interesting. So no, ChatGPT is not a professional Scrum Master at this point. I do think the tools are getting better. I think AI is improving. As far as apps to do the retro, the daily, Scrum and things like that, I'm not a huge fan. I think the interactions, whether it's remote or in person, are really important. And I don't think the tools are there yet to automate how a Scrum Master facilitates and guides and coaches and teaches and trains. But the tools are getting impressive, though. What do you think, Todd?
I think that if we're talking about just those tools, it's a short-sighted sense of what a Scrum Master really is. Those tools can't help to find a deficiency in collaboration in the Scrum team, or between the Scrum team and the organization, or between the product owner and the stakeholders, right? Which is part of what a Scrum Master needs to do. Those tools can't pinpoint areas where we need to improve, like helping our product owner, or where there's organizational impediments that we need to jump in and resolve. Those tools can't get a quiet developer to share their opinion with the rest of the group. Quite frankly, I think those are tools that are okay, but we're humans and we're always going to be. And I don't know that there's a future, although there's some pretty scary movies about it. I don't know that there's a future that is going to be able to have something completely interpret exactly what a human's thinking at any given time, even if we get microchips in our faces or something like that. So.
Yeah, I do think some people on LinkedIn are doing, I saw this on LinkedIn, but they're in other places too. They're doing some things like, they'll to say, hey, ChatGPT, create a retrospective format based off of The Dark Knight. And so you get a Batman retro format. I think it's a cute trick. And so if you're looking for that kind of stuff, it can help. But to Todd's point, it's not going to be, it doesn't, these tools do not have experience, right? And so can they assist a Scrum Master? I think yes. There are some interesting things they can do, but they don't have the experience, the intuition, the EQ, the IQ, all of those things that make us human and that help us connect and interact. And I see it as, so I'll take it to an analogy would be grandmaster chess players, right? If you take a grandmaster chess player and you give them an engine to calculate moves, they're unbeatable, right? So it's an assistive technology that prevents the best in the world from making blunders, like serious blunders. But it still cannot, even the best engines on the planet still fall susceptible to horizons, limitations. They're still susceptible to positional understanding, although that's getting good. And so there's still things that humans can do, although just brute force calculation we get killed at. So I think it's interesting stuff. It's not going to take over the world, but could you use it to assist you and do some interesting things? Yeah, we're playing around with the tools, and there's some neat tricks. But I still think your Scrum Master jobs are safe and secure, at least from ChatGPT. Are we good there, Todd?
Yep.
All right. We have some members in the chat here. I want to make sure I said hey to Cleon. We see up there, and some others that are popping in. Violet, Happy New Year's. What questions would you recommend Scrum Masters to ask themselves that want to start with EBM? Todd, maybe this is a good one. You want to take this one first?
Sure. So, right, the three components of EBM: goals, evidence, empiricism. One thing we find, and this has been a long problem that I find when I start asking questions in organizations about goals, and is oftentimes there aren't any. We had a long conversation about sprint goal and product goal in the context of Scrum, and in EBM, it's strategic, intermediate, and immediate tactical. So I think that I might start there, and I'd start asking myself whether there's alignment with goals and whether the goals are transparent and clear. Next to that, when we start to talk about measurements, unrealized value, current value, time to market, and ability to innovate, where are we focused right now? And what are we measuring? And is it the right thing if we're focused on that? And then if we're focused on something in particular, what are we ignoring? So I think this is a big thing to think about when it comes to as a Scrum Master, how do we want to start? I think without starting and having a good comprehension with where we need work with goals, everything else may be meaningless. We might just be, measuring things and heading in some kind of obscure direction that we don't even understand. So I'd probably start there and then just start to take a peek at the KVAs to understand if behaviorally we're measuring anything that's damaging, right?
Yeah, the goal part really sticks out for me as well. Like, what is it that we're actually trying to do here? Like, what do we think EBM is going to enable us to achieve? I think that's just a high level question. Like, what decisions are we trying to make that we don't feel like we can make today without this information? How will we actually make this framework actionable? Right? What are we actually going to do once we have this information? What decisions are we willing to make? I think as a Scrum Master, if we go a little meta above this, what kind of relationships do I have in the organization? Right? Because Todd tells countless stories of using EBM and almost getting fired. Right? I mean, EBM will uncover things that will make people uncomfortable. And so what kind of relationships do you have, and what kind of methods and techniques will you use when an uncomfortable truth emerges, so that it's able to be, so that we can do something positive rather than triggering some negative reaction? And so I think there's a lot of those things outside of just implementing the framework that you need to consider as well. And if you don't have those types of relationships yet, build them. But I think all of those are important questions to ask in that space. Cool. All right. Following, so Bob wants to piggyback on Violet's excellent question. What would be your book recommendations for engaging others with EBM? Stay tuned.
Mm-hmm. Enough said. Moving on.
In the short term, it's not a book, but we have a playlist on the YouTube website, or on our YouTube channel, that is all about EBM, and we recommend that you check that out. And it's free. I believe that one's still.
Yep.
Might be. Yep. That one is still free. So I highly recommend you jump on the Agile for Humans YouTube channel, watch. It's a couple hours of videos that we put together, and it teaches EBM. So go check that out. Join us in a class. Todd and I teach the one-day Scrum.org EBM course that gets you going with the framework. So lots of different ways to get started, but yeah, I think we're going to leave it there. Good questions are coming in. We appreciate it. From Mr. How do you ensure your trainings work long-term, even when you stop working with that team? I have long wondered how Scrum trainers do this.
In the past, I've coupled quite a bit. I've coupled training with consulting. I've often thought this about training, is that it's like injecting steroids a bit, right? Eventually, those steroids are going to wear off and even potentially have a negative effect, right? So I don't know why that's the example that I thought of like many years ago when I was flying out of Wisconsin. I'm like, I just injected steroids into this company, and then on the way away, I'm driving away, and the manager calls me like, "What'd you do to my team?" Right? Like, we do a lot when it comes to last year. Actually, when it comes to EBM, I was doing a data study to know how many returning students we had and how many organizations came back to us. And it was like 9%. And so that to me means that maybe there's area for improvement to have people coming back and keep the conversation going. We do a lot to follow up on with newsletters and things like that. And that's why we have an entire YouTube channel dedicated to this stuff. So I could say like, see, they said this in class. Here's exactly what they said. I can't describe it the way they described it. There's that. I will tell you that I have worked in an organization or two extensively from a consulting and a training perspective. And then when the person that really took to it, or the few people there that became the staples of holding up the improvements and continuing to pursue professional Scrum left, that it faltered, right? So this isn't easy stuff. So there's a lot of different ways that we've attacked it, from blogging to YouTube to consulting to all these things, really.
Yeah, I like your analogy of injecting steroids into a team, Todd. And something that you and I specifically do is that we make sure that people have the opportunity to stay in contact with us, right? So we don't just ring and run, we don't just cash the check and leave, we don't just teach and disappear. So there are a number of students who want to continue their journey, and we're supportive of that. And so I think just being open to the fact that, look, I as trainers, we don't see this as a transactional thing. And I think that's really important. There's some that see it as, look, you paid money, you got 2 days, we're done. We're fostering community, as Todd mentioned. We're trying to build out Agile for Humans as a place where people can come to learn, and where we're trying to remove the barrier of that financial piece, so that people who may not have the means to join us in a class, or who just aren't ready for that, can still get started. And for those who have been in a class, they can look at some of these playlists and some of these shows we do and actually continue that learning. And so I think part of the long-term benefit, past the 2-day training or the 3-day training or whatever it is that we do, is maintaining relationship, providing opportunities for further growth and learning, and actually having an interest in that student long-term. And so we have the hearts of teachers, and that's what we want to do. And is it the right business choice? Probably not. But from a human perspective, it's Agile for Humans. It's not Agile for profit. And so that's where we're at.
I'll also say too that it's been Ken Schwaber's longstanding opinion that validated learning comes in the form of difficult exams. And that's why we're Scrum.org trainers, because the exams are difficult. And we go and we look, we trend, and we like to see what our students are doing and how they're coping with any of the exams. And we'll even help try to some of the higher level ones, which we're trying to create this series for, because we really only have so much time in a day. That's why we're trying the Deeper into Scrum series. It just becomes difficult to mentor a lot of people.
Yep.
But I also like the idea behind validated learning. So, and that's I feel pretty strongly that Scrum.org exams help with that.
Yeah. Cleon, welcome. Thank you for joining the Agile for Humans YouTube channel as a member. Also want to make sure I thank Violet and Siobhan for being here, as they're also members in the community. Thank you for being here. Thanks for asking questions. Another community member, Rob, he said he asked ChatGPT, what is Agile for Humans? It did not mention Todd and I, so therefore it's trash. Okay.
What did you started, Ryan?
It's my fault. It is my fault. Rob, welcome. Thanks. It's great to see you here. Let's see here. So Cleon, you're saying Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you. Great to see you here. Thanks for joining us. John, do you have any advice to a Scrum Master? So Todd, I'm going to leave. This is really part of your path. I have fulfilled the product owner position a few times, but this is really your jam. Do you have any advice to a Scrum Master who's considering making the shift? We've both worn the hat, but Todd certainly has more experience in this space than I do. So Todd, if you're moving from Scrum Master to product owner, I'm assuming this is your first product owner endeavor. What advice would you give a Scrum Master considering that shift?
Stay in your lane as far as accountability is concerned. You're not a Scrum Master anymore. You're a product owner. If you're trying to transition, read up as much as you can, because the ins and outs of what it's like when you're dealing with a product owner that is not present, or all the anti-patterns that we've talked about. For me, one of the biggest things was not veering away from Scrum, leveraging Scrum for what it is, right? So that means having the right people in a sprint review, having conversations with the right people all the time. And that it really started with that. And then trusting that I was getting the transparency that I needed, because it's really easy when pressure mounts to fall back into some kind of like push mentality. And what will happen is the teams will resent you for it. So I've long stood by the fact that as a product owner, I want developers and the rest of the Scrum team to respect my position, but not do it by force, right? Do it by collaboration. So those are a couple of things I remember being very nervous as a new product owner, and then taking a job as a product owner again in a scaled environment. And I trusted myself, I trusted my instincts, and I trusted Scrum to leverage it the appropriate way for my products. Right?
Yeah. And the only thing I would highlight is value, value, value. Mm-hmm. One of the hardest things you'll do as a product owner is to actually define what value means in your context. And so really work hard on that. Do the deep work there. If you don't know what I mean by deep work, check out Cal Newport's book, Deep Work. You're going to spend a lot of time really going into deep, heavy thought about value. There's a cost component to that. Make sure you understand what your sprints cost. Make sure that you understand what kind of value you're trying to deliver. If you're a Scrum Master, I'm sure you know the question, is the juice worth the squeeze? Well, now that's a question that's got to be ringing in your head all the time. Am I about to execute a sprint that's worth it? And so, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of great videos on the YouTube channel here that can help you. It's a lonely position. It's one where you're going to be in the middle of a lot of different disagreements and needs, and just stay strong, be a good, make sure you got a good partner in the Scrum Master. And good luck. Let us know how it goes. Leave us some comments as you make this transition. Mary Miller's here. Todd. Mary is a longtime listener, big supporter. I think she's a member. I think she's a great contributor to our YouTube channel. So Mary, it's great to see you here. What are some strategies or approaches you have used in working with executives that are having a tough time articulating their goals? It's been tough to move from them telling people specific work to be done to telling us the context and strategy they are attempting to fulfill. Todd, for me, it's the type of questions we ask, right? I think it's kind of like what you put in is what you get out. And so if you ask an executive, what do you want me to do? They'll tell you what to do. If you ask an executive, what's possible once we finish this work? So go ahead and what I'm saying is let the executive say what they want you to do, right? So don't fight it. Let them articulate it. And if they give you 10 different things, say, that's great. Once those 10 things are in place, what is possible? What would you expect to see once that work's done? And then get quiet and listen. And you're probably going to hear a hint of a goal. But I think it's different question asking that really pops up in my mind immediately. Todd, what do you think?
Tread lightly, because they might not have a strategy. Right. They might want to hold that strategy, if they do have it, tight to the vest, because the second they really make it clear and they make it their decision, their skin's on the line. I'm not trying to say they're bad people. This is new to them, right? They're used to commanding and controlling, and that's where they've made a career out of. It's not motivating to the people that report to them or the chain that goes up. But I've tread around this before and made the mistake of going at it too fast, too hard, and only to find that their strategy wasn't clear, developed, or they just didn't want to share it because it really put them on the hook. So I would tread lightly and warm into this conversation. I wouldn't go at it like a bull, because I have before, and it hasn't worked out that well for me. So. Yeah. And I didn't cause the change that I was looking to cause, right?
Yeah, and you don't have to go alone, right? I think a Scrum Master walking into this conversation should have a product owner with them, right? Let's talk about the overall product vision and the product goal and the sprint goals and how the executive can speak into those. And so it's really, to Todd's point, tread lightly, but also ensure that the way that you have framed the conversation is empowering to the executive. Right? You want to show them how they're getting a huge amount of benefit by having this conversation, not demanding they do something because the Scrum Guide says so. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. And then, on top of that, I think to mention too, the alignment and strategy of goals and how the impacts of behaviors come all the way down, right? Like If you make this clear, you stick your neck out, and it's unbelievably clear. Every single thing that we do in this area of the company for this product, and it creates alignment. Everything we need to do has to be aligned there.
Yeah. Great question. I think, Todd, this will be the one we end on this week. So Mary, thank you for that question. We hope that was helpful. We saw there's another question there in the chat. Maybe we'll do a video in the future on the Flow Metrics book. But we've hit our time box, and so we want to say thank you to everybody for your questions. Thank you for being here. Be sure to let your friends know and all of your Agile colleagues. On Wednesdays at noon Eastern, we fire this up. We take your questions, and we really we enjoy hearing from all of you and what's going on in your worlds, and these questions help us understand the needs out there. So thank you for that. I'm going to throw the end screen up. It's end screen time for those of you familiar with the videos. Like and subscribe. Check us out on socials. Make sure that you are part of the community. So go over to the YouTube channel, check out the memberships, at least like and subscribe so you never miss a video. We thank you very much for being here. We hope you got a ton out of it. And we'll see you next week.